Hello, everyone. It's the top of the hour, so let's get started. My name is Steve Persh of Pantheon, and today we'll be looking at one of the oldest websites on the whole internet, Exploratorium.edu. Now, I just said this is one of the oldest websites on the whole internet, but looking at it, this website looks somewhat newish. How might I know that this website, built for a science education space in San Francisco that I have on good authority, I need to visit in person next time I take my kids out to the Bay Area. How might I know that this is indeed a long-standing old website? Well, I could run the who is command, one of those handy-dandy command line commands, and I can see here from the public information about this domain name that this domain record was activated on May 28th, 1992, nearly 32 years ago. That's less than 6 months after the High Performance Computing Act that then Senator Al Gore developed to accelerate the internet. So this is something that has been out there a long time. If I think about, getpantheon.com, the first domain name for Pantheon, the company I work at, that wasn't created until 2009. Or if I think about one of my own domain names, stevepersh.com. I think I registered that when I was in college back in 2006. There is a long span of internet history from 1992 to 2006 when I started building websites and when the WordPress and Drupal community really took off in that LAMP stack era. So there must have been a whole lot of Exploratorium in that 90s era. Now, we'll meet some folks from the Exploratorium web team in just a minute, but in talking with them before, I've known that this annex.exploratorium.edu subdomain houses some of those 90s era web pages. And from here, I can get to the science of cooking, what makes meat and juicy, some presumably hand-coded HTML files. Perhaps when I was in high school biology class, I would have benefited from learning about the amazing adaptable frog. I could have been learning about slinkies and how they can model seismic activity in 1994. I could have been learning about the science of cycling and gear ratios through animated GIFs. I could have been learning about cow eye dissection. I think I did do that, dissect a cow eye in either grade school or high school biology. And even those early Flash animations and Flash interactive web elements that were some of my first website making activities, the Exploratorium team has even figured out a way to preserve those decades later using open source adaptations that keep Flash projects online. So I feel like I'm diving down a rabbit hole. I could click around 90s era web pages for the whole hour, but that's really not what we're here to do. So let's meet some members of the team. Let's bring on George and Jim, who can provide a whole lot more context. Well, you guys are already off of video. You've been here the whole time. Let's bring into the conversation George Perry, the online media manager at the Exploratorium, and Jim Birch, an engineering manager at Kanopi Studios. George and Jim, it's good to see you again. How's it going today?
Going well. Good to see you too.
Yeah, thanks.
So George, I gave a very brief overview of what the Exploratorium is, but for those watching who may have never heard of the Exploratorium, what is the Exploratorium, and how did you come to work there in your career?
Okay, so my name is George Perry. He, him pronouns. I've been at the Exploratorium for about 3 years. I came to Exploratorium as a departure from tech. I worked in various developer and leadership roles throughout my career history. What brought me here was really the content, just the wealth of content and the opportunity to do some amazing things with it, to build upon what they have. Also in my spare time, I'm a little bit of I like being a maker, but I play one occasionally on the weekends. So that's been a very fun experience. our website has been around for 30 years, and we actually do have a page about it, um, which we'll show later. And the Wayback Machine has so many renditions of our various websites forms. When I started, we had about 9,000 pages, web pages. There's a lot. Many of many of which are a combination of HTML, vanilla PHP, and some in Drupal. And we, you know, basically took on the project of redesigning our website with the help of Kanopi. It's worked out very well, and time for Jim to tell you more about him.
Yeah, Jim, tell us about yourself and how Canopy came to be involved in the Exploratorium's website.
Sure. So I started on this project early in 2020, I believe. And we were engaged to do what we call a transition plan. So the Exploratorium knew that they had servers and servers of web content, some of it in Drupal 7, like you said, and some of it, from the dawn of the internet. So our original first phase was just doing audit to see what they had, kind of like digital archaeology, figuring out, what needed to come forward, what didn't need to come forward, what needed to be annexed. And then while we worked through that, a global pandemic happened. So you can imagine what that did to a science museum with a physical location. The project was, put on pause, and actually the web team was laid off. And then ultimately, George was hired to rebuild that team with a suite of excellent developers on the Exploratorium side. And then they re-engaged us to, start a phase 2 and a phase 3 of this project.
Yeah, so a whole lot of transition periods there. I do want to get into how those transitions went, both technically and collaboratively. But I think it'll be beneficial to first ground ourselves more in the bookends of things. So George, I'll turn the screen share over to you, and can you help give us more of a sense of where the Exploratorium began, as well as what things look like now inside of a modern Drupal install for you and your team?
Sure thing. Let me share my screen very quickly. So it was a I mean, we did a lot. Let's put it that way. We really did a lot. I'm trying to get this started. So we started off going to another window. We started off with a website that looked fairly, what can I say? Not this one, fairly mundane. But we took it to we basically improved it over time. We started off with the older website, which looked more like it archived. Had it open a second ago. That looks like this. And this is still somewhat live. This is when we right at the cutover. And it had
this
a
is the
lot
Drupal
of
7 version.
This is Drupal 7 version. It had a lot of content. We decided to go from that to a dark background, which has served us really, really well. For example, here is the new Eclipse site for the current upcoming Eclipse, which actually happens in 4 days, as you can see, and we'll be live casting that. From the old Eclipse site, which is, I can show you from the Wayback Machine, from the one 2 previous, or 2020 Eclipse. So it took a lot of work. We had a massive amount of content. We had a history of uploading files willy-nilly to Pantheon and using them. So some were referenced in Drupal, some were not. We had static HTML in there too. So we decided to really clean that up, get our files that were used indexed, only host on the Drupal website what is in Drupal, and move the static HTML to Annex, and also to refurbish some pages. For example, this is a Flash website that we had for Neverlost, which features the history of Hawaiian navigation. It's very, it was great for its time. We used how can I say? We did use Ruffle to make this work. What we ended up doing is redoing it, for example, in here, and we did that for some of our like really like top historic content, such as Age on Other Worlds, which is one of the pages. The original webmaster, man who created the website, Ron Hipsman, created long ago. This is one of our top pages, and it has always been. It gets about 5% of our traffic. We just tried to stay true to it and use modern technology as best we could. Tried to make our equations even ADA friendly with the help of MathJax, and it came out to be a really good product. We have, our history. Like I said, we've been around for 30 years, right? And About History website really goes through that. You see some of the iterations. You see a lot of our distinguished visitors, and our learners. The old website, where it was hosted, with all the wires coming out the back and everything. To the people who visited and made it work. It was a very ambitious undertaking for its time, and we've done a lot with it. It's been 30 years on the internet, so yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see those early government funders of the internet
Right.
visiting the Exploratorium there in '95.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's great to see these old Flash pieces kept alive. My college professor in 2006 told me that web development was about to get so much easier. We wouldn't have to worry about cross-browser compatibility. Everything would just be in Flash, and that
Yeah.
would make everything simpler. And then jQuery
Yeah.
came around, and then iPhone another year later. So there's a whole lot of change that has needed to be navigated here. Could you show a
Yeah.
bit more of the CMS side of how some of these
Sure.
elements are being
Jump over to here.
managed?
All right. So here is our current CMS. As you can see, we're able to edit pages like this page from our I'll show it to you real quick, from our past winter exhibition. We use Drupal paragraphs. We do support multilingual, as you can see. And when editing that page, it's breaks down in a number of different ways. We came a long way. So we have this one thing that Jim I hope will talk about, experiences, where we had a content type for event, a content type for exhibits, and we had this thing called exhibitions, but they were never exhibitions. They were basic pages that got redirected from events, so they could be where the events are, because our system was a bird's nest. And using paragraphs, it allowed us to really, really create much better content and components, even complex components such as like columns and card grids, which have paragraphs in paragraphs, sometimes in paragraphs, but not that often. So we could do really, really cool things. We even, like the new Age on Other Worlds, we use React to do some React widgets, so we could have more interactive pages as well. And for the editor experience, there was part of it that I can say was really we had a lot of roles, a lot of roles, which I'll show, and then this is really nice. Like this, our CK editor 5 that we're using with Drupal 10 now, so we moved to Drupal 9 has really helped to improve the experience. The Bootstrap UI library has really helped us to deliver content in a more modern way. We even use Emulsify and Storybook so that we can do our design, go from Figma to components to web. And our roles.
George, one thing that stands out to me is, both here and in some of the earlier conversations we've had, it stood out to me that you're using the word "we" to describe the group of people who brought this paragraphs configuration into being. And I think that concept of "we" here includes Kanopi, and that stands out to me because I'm aware of other projects and other teams that don't use that kind of language, that have kind of a hard divide between the organization, the institution for whom the website exists, and a third-party agency seen as a them, not a cohesive us. Could you speak to well, first, am I accurate that you're operating somewhat as a unified team to some extent?
Very much
and how
so.
did that come to be?
Yeah, very much so. We definitely are operating as a unified team. I mean, we kind of, felt that we wanted to partner with a consulting firm that was, we'd be in this together. We'd be working together hand in hand. We actually made sure that we would be touching the web application or development process too, leveling up ourselves. And that's really made for a great partnership and really good and a really excellent product. If I had to do it again, I'd choose the same folks and do it the same way. With some changes. There's some things we learned along the way, for sure.
Nothing's perfect.
Nothing's perfect. We have our bumps and bruises, but it worked really well. And Exploratorium is a hands-on learning laboratory, and because it's hands-on, everybody, hands-on is in our DNA. And so we wanted to get to know it as much as we can so we can have those conversations, so we can better create a website for our internal users and our external users. And that partnership and working closely with Kanopi, it's still continuing, and it's been a really good thing for all of us.
And Jim, could you speak to how Kanopi structures engagements so that collaborative vibe actually happens reliably?
Sure. So, we always say at Kanopi that when you launch your website, that's the first day of your website. That's your happy birthday. We do these large build projects. I think, over the course of 3 years, it took us from initial engagement to actually launching the site on modern Drupal. But we've been engaged with the Exploratorium ever since. And I'm no longer on the project, but George and I still seem to Slack weekly, and I want to make sure that what I built for them 2 years ago still works, or if they're changing it, I want to know so I can learn from them and make better things. So during the build engagement, we had twice weekly stand-ups. We work in a framework called Teamwork to track tickets, and all of the Exploratorium team was in there with us, so we could comment back and forth. We could assign people tickets to review. And then, while we dealt with George's web team, they dealt with the larger stakeholder teams at the Exploratorium and aggregated feedback, brought them back to us. And then every once in a while, we'd give presentations and reviews to those greater teams. But yeah, it was a very cohesive relationship. And then, in the support realm, George meets with Nakane and Andy, a small team that manages them, and we work in the Exploratorium's Jira now. So we made that transition to work what works best for them, now that we're in the day-to-day maintenance of the website.
That makes sense. We've got a question in chat as well here from Chris. What drove the decision to use paragraphs, not layout builder? And I'm particularly interested in this dynamic because in a week and a day, I'll be at an event in Atlanta, and I've been drafted into a panel discussion about paragraphs versus layout builder. I'll be speaking to WordPress's Gutenberg or block editor interface. Someone else will be showing off, I think, WordPress Elementor. So how did this group decide that within Drupal, paragraphs module was the preferable option over something like layout builder, or there is a Drupal Gutenberg module too?
There are those wonderful things now.
Yes, there you go.
And in Drupal 8, Layout Builder did exist, though the ecosystem was not as fleshed out as it is today. So, we had experience with paragraphs. We went with a asynchronous widget, which allows you to have different paragraphs for different languages. So we didn't want to lock the secondary or other languages into having the same look and feel as the primary site language. So yeah, if it was this day and age, we would definitely have a comparison of what is available. We did that, and I'll show you in a little bit. Put together pros and cons, put together demos. One great thing about hosting on Pantheon is you can put together demos on multi-dev environments, and we could show it to George's team, but they could also extend that to show it to additional content editors and stakeholders to see what they would like to use or what they preferred. But yeah, at the time, paragraphs was the most solid ecosystem. Didn't have to be extended too much. But yeah.
And George, for your coworkers who are not steeped in the Drupalisms, what about this option was preferable to them?
Well, as far as paragraphs went, it gave us, like, we were coming from a place where we had a lot of our team, which was more technical, dealing with more complex pages, or even just moderately complex pages. And this allowed us to go to a less technical audience, which is more of editorial for some of our content. But it also allowed us to really bathe in our design system. Okay, probably a wrong word to use, but to really use our design
I like that imagery.
Like we really just dove in there and just took on to creating a design system and using components and that whole paradigm of Storybook, which is mainly React and like Vue, to design and realize those components really helped. Layout Builder, we were still coming out of a world of Drupal 7, so it's like, what is either Layout Builder or Paragraphs was very new to us. When we were vetting it with Kanopi, Layout Builder, I think, came up a couple times, and at the time, Paragraphs was a better or viable solution. We felt that we could extend this experience to meet our needs. We had some requirements, which we're still going through some work with it for when we're dealing with multilingual. We do have like 10 or 11 languages on our website, not everywhere, only on a few pages. But vast majority of everything is just English with some Spanish, traditional Chinese, and Filipino. And then the other language
Yeah.
are less. But it worked out well.
Mhm.
And I can't necessarily say how Layout Builder would have turned out. It may be something to investigate in the future, but it would be at a time when, a couple years down the line.
Mhm. George, could you speak more to that translation piece, like with the Exploratorium's physical presence in such a global city where they're the residents of San Francisco, tourists coming
Right.
from any number of countries, speaking any number of languages. How does
Exactly.
how does that diversity get represented on the web?
Well, like for example, plan your visit, and I'm gonna move over here. We have it in, a ton of different, right? So we try to represent most of our visitor content and our exhibitions in other languages. Um, our most popular second language of our site that gets most visited is our Spanish content. So we really do make sure that we have the Spanish content for our visitors so that, we can make sure they have a good experience. And multilingual is hard. There are a lot of challenges, a lots of parts to translate. Some things that haven't quite made it into translation. Uh, but it's been a big learning experience. We've used TMGMT, Translation Management Tool. We use Google Translate and Amazon Translate. We have some continuous translations set up for things like our hours, which I'll just go straight to the hours page, which I clicked on. So that people can, figure out when, so we can keep this up to date and roll with those changes. We have also human translators. That right now those people don't work in the Drupal interface. They just submit the translations to us and we put them in for our team or the editorial team. So that works out really well. We even have, like I mentioned, the Never Lost website, which was Hawaiian Navigation, was originally its first language was Hawaiian, and
Mm.
then also redone as well in English. So we also have that sub-site in Hawaiian. So it's a very cool experience for folks to preserve their language and culture. Um,
And that is
and
a whole lot of complexity to
yeah,
uh, keep
and
straight. You
it is, it really is. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
earlier you alluded to the Eclipse portion of the
Mhm.
website. My
Yeah,
understanding is, or I think you said that was one of the first areas of the website that needed to cut over to this newer version
it did.
of Drupal. Could you speak to how that played out?
Right. So we had the website in Drupal 7 before, and the Eclipse happened. The one that happened last year happened before we actually launched the website by a couple months. So we use advanced global CDN to help us to do a trick where the website went to Drupal 7, but when you hit /Eclipse, that part of the website went to Drupal 9, and additionally, its dependencies went to Drupal 9 as well. So we were able to have everything here, wrapped in, nope, that's the way, way back website, wrapped in
Way,
the
way
old,
back.
yeah, wrapped in the old Drupal 7, so
Mhm.
that you could, so you wouldn't get this, you would actually get this. And it worked out really well. We learned a lot from that as far as, and Kanopi did it, they contributed a lot to it, and Pantheon as well. Helped us to get to the point where we could set that up. And
Yeah.
then finally, when we cut over on April 19th last year, we just we took this down and had the whole website go over to Drupal 9, which worked great. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that tactic is one I'd I think more teams would benefit from
Hmm.
to de-risk what are otherwise
Yeah.
huge, fraught, all or nothing relaunches
Hmm.
where everything cuts over all at once. Although there is, as you were alluding to, a lot of complexity to making sure it doesn't break. But if you can cut over path by path, then I presume your team was able to validate that the
Right.
modern Drupal paragraphs
Right.
interfaces were behaving as expected. That or it was working fine on everyone's mobile devices. Any number of quality assurance tasks that sometimes should happen before go live, but may not actually happen until people realize
Yeah.
this is real. This is real. It's on the internet now.
Well,
I think it's
and as a testament to that, like the multi-devs really helped us to test a lot before we went live with the cutover on various form factors. So we had a lot of dry runs and worked closely and really knew, because of the partnership work, knew how to QA the site very well.
mhm.
Yeah. One of the original ideas for the uh, domain masking is what it's called. So Pantheon through the AG CDN can, send your domains or domain partials, through their secret sauce and end up on whichever Pantheon instance you desire. The original idea was that we switch over the experiences, which George alluded to yesterday. But as we worked through the scenarios of doing a switchover like that, the experiences have a lot of related content, which is one of the best things about Drupal is the entity relation fields. So we can say this event is about this exhibit or this science snack or this tinkering experiment. But because of that, we didn't want to give the site visitors a jarring experience of bouncing between the modern Drupal site and the Drupal 7 site. So we paused on that, and where we had this whole site section that was the Eclipse, when all of the content is its own, that was a perfect candidate to launch beforehand, and like you said, Steve, mitigate some of the risk of migration of this size.
Yeah, and we've got a few questions here that Jim may speak to some of your areas. So let's flip over the screen share. Yulia is curious how the switch played out in terms of search engine optimization, and then James is also wondering about the decision to go to Drupal 9 first and then 10. And I'll guess that's a quick one of just
People 10 didn't exist
that
yet.
was right.
Yeah, so we started on the process with Drupal 8, and as Drupal 9 was released through the build process, we upgraded. Not right away. We usually wait till a 0.1 release is vetted. But yeah, by the time we launched, we were on the latest version of Drupal 9, and the site has since been upgraded to Drupal 10, Drupal 10.1, and Drupal 10.2, I believe, with 3 coming in June. And then George, I'll let you handle the SEO, as that was another great party that we got to work with.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time considering our SEO, and even in the content that we redid from our legacy content in Drupal 9. So we did a deep dive on Google Search Analytics, Google Analytics, evaluated content from the perspective of various user personas, visitors, educators, just people surf the internet for something cool. And we ended up, I guess I could do a little brief screen share. We ended up in a situation where, hopefully you can see this in Google Analytics. We didn't really, this is the year leading into the cutover and the year and the moment of the cutover after, so it's offset by 1 year. Things worked out pretty well. We didn't have a fall We were able to really maintain SEO. We work closely with our SEO partners. Some things even got stronger. Comparing one year to the other year, our traffic, our views went up. They definitely went way up. And we all benefit. And I'm just looking right now at a couple key pages, which is homepage, an external site just as because they're buying tickets here. So it's our external buy ticket site, our visit page, the one that you saw, which is translated into all the languages, and one of our historic annual events, Pi Day. So Pi Day always gets its spike right around, you see that little spike? That's
Yep.
March 14th. And that happens every year, and it wasn't even those annual campaigns weren't affected. And we did get a little bit of I would say a little bit of a boost from the pandemic being ending more and more. But overall, like in the following months, we didn't see a drop off on traffic. We didn't see a drop off in search rank. Yeah, it worked out really, really well. And some things even improved, like our multilingual pages improved now that they're official. They were really English Drupal pages where we just tack the language as a suffix onto them. So we're kind of hoping that Google or whoever would pick up that this is in Spanish, even though the headers say it's English, the HTML's lang attribute says it's English, but the rest of it's in Spanish, and we didn't have anything saying otherwise. So, we grew along the way, and I think it definitely, it showed in that we kept the SEO.
That's great. Jim, what does Kanopi do in terms of planning out these kinds of content migrations to ensure that SEO doesn't suffer and that what needs to be preserved is preserved, and then opportunities for simplification are appropriately taken up?
Why, funny you should ask, Steve. But we do a lot of spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets.
Yes, I know everybody's been waiting for this, like the cool old 90s websites are the best, but we live in spreadsheet land for a long time to aggregate data about the site. And we do this in many different forms, and then bring them to the team to discuss and disperse throughout their stakeholders also. So one of the first things we do, and Steve, I've known you worked on this spreadsheet, a decade or so ago.
This is taking me back.
Is do an audit of the Drupal 7 site. So where are we coming from? So this spreadsheet helps us architect or discover what the Drupal 7 site is made of. So we go through every entity. You can see at the bottom here, there are a million tabs of entities and entity-like things, image styles, path auto patterns. The content types is the secret sauce here because that's most of what you migrate. The Drupal 7 site used field collections, which migrate to paragraphs in a modern Drupal instance since field collections no longer exist. And then on each content type, you have many, many fields. And it would be an understatement if I didn't say the Exploratorium content types didn't have many, 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 many fields. But that's not all, because the structure only defines what a developer set up at one point in time. We also do content audits. So inside of that Drupal structure, you can actually see, okay, there's this add slideshow field that has 0 content. You have a body field, but you also have additional body content. Well, that sounds a little bit hacky. Maybe we should not do that in the future. So it really gave us insight into, what was there, and what could be left behind, most importantly. From there, we left the Drupal realm. I use a tool called Screaming Frog SEO Spider, which is not just an SEO tool, but it's also a very good content auditing tool. So this gave us the insight into what wasn't in Drupal. When we decided that we were going to concentrate on Drupal for a majority of the build project, this gave George insight into what their side projects were going to be, or what their phase 3 projects were going to be. Look at the stakeholders. Does this content still need to live on the internet? So, while I joke, I love spreadsheets. It gives us the insight. What's the magic sauce that comes out of that is the meanings that these spreadsheets inform.
Yeah, 'cause I imagine these spreadsheets also decay. Like, these spreadsheets are representing historical information, but if you don't act upon these spreadsheets quickly, well, then the spreadsheets themselves get out of sync with reality and then are just one more semi-reliable historical artifact.
Indeed, they are. I mean, this crawl happened on probably over a 2-day period, because that's how long it takes to crawl the Exploratorium website, in April of 2021.
Yeah.
And a day later, probably halfway through that day, they published another couple science snacks and blog posts and changed content on this and that. So yeah, it is a moment in time. When we do get into migration, we document it too. Code base where we commit code and we have a Git history. But with running migrations, it is content related. So we track, how many nodes we ran, when we ran it, what the last day was. Are we calling that done? Is that the Delta migration, or are we going to migrate more and more? So, in this process, we migrated many times over the course of a few months, and then we have a break where we work on other parts of the site. And then before we launch, we do what they call a Delta migration, is that one last time. We're not going to update the content that lives in the site already, but we're going to get all the new content that comes in. So it's important to keep track of these things. And then, what aren't we going to migrate? So we did make some decisions throughout the process. The Exploratorium has a wired pier and ships that visit it, and there was content types for these things. We decided that I think the wired pier turned into a custom module that created some blocks that were placed on pages, giving scientific data about the San Francisco Bay. And then the ship visits turned into experiences. So we actually didn't need to migrate these things. So it's good.
George, how do you take spreadsheets like this and use them as conversation starters with the folks you're working with inside the Exploratorium, who are 1 or 2 steps removed from the website, who may not want to engage in a giant spreadsheet, who may see dozens of columns, hundreds of rows, and think, you know what, George, I trust you. I don't even want to process this information.
Well, the spreadsheets actually, first, I love analytics and I love data. So it helps a bit. It helped a lot to have them. Although we are an educational institution, a science museum, people love passionate conversations about their content and their one viewer who benefits from it. So it became a really good tool in figuring out the conversations to dive deeper, to do our UX design, to consolidate content types. And oh my God, you see how many bundles those are? It's ridiculous. So we were able to consolidate a lot, paired with the data from Google Analytics and Google Search, and learning about the user personas and some user persona research we had. With this, we were able to have those tough conversations of, look, we can move this, or we can sunset it, or we can archive it. And a lot of decisions were made on that. We, were able to say okay, this is really the same as something else, and merge them, Migration was of data was complex, as Jim said. I mean, it was really complex because we had fields that were used one way by one team and other fields were used differently by another team, and they were still in the same content type. So they should merge. It looks like there's no overlap, so maybe we can merge them. You know, so we really benefited from having this information in front of us, and allowed us to make some tough decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. We are, I think, 46 minutes past the top of the hour. We're starting to run low on time. If anyone watching here has questions, feel free to drop them into the chat, the Q&A. And Jim, something about Rector and PHP Stan code tests. Could you speak to those?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with James about the tools that we use to mitigate the risks that new versions of Drupal have. So we use Circle CI workflow that runs code tests and live build tests, front end tests on every pull request that we make. And George and his team have been amazing at learning these really specific tests you have to pass to get your code merged in. And George has even embraced them and added more. So before the code is even deployed, we run Drupal Rector tests, and those look for deprecations that are known in the next version of Drupal, and call them out now. So we don't let you commit code that is going to be deprecated in Drupal 11, into the code base now. PHP Stan tests are the next level. They make a lot of developers cry. Basically, PHP Stan, I think their moniker is that they look for errors before the errors even happen. And then, we run PHP coding standards, also PHP CS. After the site's deployed to a multi-dev on a pull request, we run Cypress tests. We run Lighthouse tests, Tally, which is accessibility tests, Backstop visual regression tests, and structured data testing tool. I think that's all of them. So we have a pass-fail on those tests. So if anything changes or breaks, makes a breaking change, the developer that made the push is made aware and can make a subsequent push to fix that. So that really mitigates the upgrades. And we find that like most of the time when we upgraded from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10, depending on the complexity of the site, of course, it took less than 20 hours. So we're hoping that that's the same from 10 to 11.
Yeah, and I just dropped into the chat for reference presentation I gave at DrupalCon, where I think I went too far in the direction of hooking up CI and automated tests to a Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migration. Yes, you can automatically run a Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migration upon every pull request to the Drupal 8 code base, but I learned that I don't recommend it. George, we've got a question from Yulia about the content team. How big is it? How many people?
Yes.
Are they satisfied? Are they able to self-serve their needs with paragraphs and what's been set up here?
There's two. So we have two teams, like our team, which is like web developers, two web developers, a UI developer, and a UX designer. All of us, we're fairly technical, and we're in there occasionally. Creating our more complex content when there's lots of paragraphs or custom HTML needed, or we need to create, how can I say, React widgets, or even we use Vue in one place, a couple places too. We deal with that, but we also have an editorial team, and they're writers. So they're pretty much like they're your typical, CK editor users. They use Word, they use Google Docs. They're able to get along fine in there. They won't do a lot of the layouts, but when it's really plug and play, here's something to clone and plug and play your text and do your basic formatting. They're in great shape. We've also later added some content governance tools in the web application that basically make sure that we're applying best practices in the HTML that we have in Ccater, and it usually gets to our old content where it's making sure we're trying to use media entities as best as we can, and that we don't have hard-coded full paths to exploratory resources that are on the website, so and we don't, have exposed just node IDs that will just show up as node IDs. So they're coming along, and with those recommendations, and we do have office hours for editorial and other folks. And outside of our editorial team, we have a couple other teams that are just on their own doing their thing. We have our science snacks. So if you go to Exploratorium.edu/snacks, their whole team just goes in and just has at it. They deal with their own content, so they're having a great time with it. Our press office, they do their own press releases, so they're having a ball as well. Our tinkering studio folks, they're the ultimate DIY folks, and they have at it all the time. They actually have some of our more challenging questions, but it's not your basic editor questions, because they are tinkerers. So it's works well. It's kind of this sprawl of community, to be honest.
Yeah. And how do you balance the benefits that come from that independent spirit of the tinkering group with the potential for confusion or bugs or anything else that might come from a sub group just doing their own thing?
We have that's when roles come into play, like big time. If I don't mind, I'll just drop in the screen real quick and kind of show where we started and where we are. Here is where we started. We had so many roles, and they were very specific.
That is a lot.
Some were based on what they did, some their function in the org, and some were based on like their editorial needs. So they were vertical and they were horizontal, they were random. Some we don't even know what they ever did. Some had no users, some had a ton of users. And some were, like, why do we even have a filters blackout data editor? It's very limiting. So we streamlined that to a smaller subset of roles. Obviously, it takes up the full screen, but we have much bigger rows there, where senior editor, like we don't really segment people off in their verticals, like your snacks, your tinkering, your visitor research. We did do them in like, you get this slice, you get that combination of slice. It's more like your pricing model. If you're looking at a buying of something, you have your tiers. So other than that, because we are all internal editors, there's some trust as well. We do track revisions, so that holds people to accountability, as you can see what somebody did the last time they did it. And if necessary, we can roll back. So this has worked out really well for us. The editorial staff are, they go through various here. Commenter, we don't really use that one, but we created it during the migration. And even like our tinkering editors and our press office, they are editors as well. And they have the ability to do things that we say, like, be kind, don't go there and, change things you shouldn't. And we've been good about it. And we have our authentication. We do have passwords, but we also support Google Auth. So it is tied into our single sign-on. So that helps to, mitigate any harm after departure, and also helps us to um, enforce policy.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this is really beneficial to see. I feel like these are the kind of details that everyone has to deal with, but
Hmm.
sometimes get just glossed over at the Drupal cons or the discussions of big picture or cutting edge stuff. Like roles and permissions have been in Drupal a very long time.
Yeah,
And I don't see a ton of discussion about things like, yeah, sometimes you just need to add a role called field trip blackout date editor. Like whoever added that had a
yeah,
reason to do it. Like that,
yeah,
that reality catches up. But it's good to see that you take opportunities to clean up. Like, okay, whatever pressure resulted in the creation of that super niche role, that doesn't need to uh, get replicated forever in every new version of the website.
Yeah. In this
right.
state, the sorry, Judge, go ahead.
Yeah, and we were really conscious with Kanopi, like helping us say, like, that's probably just one person, and roles aren't meant for one person, you need to keep it on a certain level. And we learned a lot from them, and got a lot of discipline in how we look at the website and how we create for it from them.
Yeah, if you have to create a role for one person in your organization, should they really be editing the website? That's why, we really try to take a MLP, a minimum lovable approach with this build and every build we do, and really try to, build a base that can be built upon. You could go in today and add 40 more roles to Drupal. It's that simple, right? It's a config change. It'd take less than 5 minutes and another 5 minutes to assign the users. But to build that out of the box, to build a really, overarching crazy, control system, is no. George, gave faith in his content editors, and a year in, they're not changing pages they're not supposed to change. And if they do, there's revisions, right? We know they made the change. So, in this day and age, yeah, it's better to start simple and then build more complexity if you need it.
Yeah. One closing question I've got for you, George. What's next on the horizon for the Exploratorium's web presence?
Oh my gosh. Well, we have spent a lot of time focusing on interactive. We do. I have our first chatbot we're going to be launching soon. We we are trying to keep getting closer to translating the homepage, having that supported in multilingual, and that's its own, how can I say, cascading land of opportunity. Because the homepage with paragraphs and entity relations means that other cascading content has to be translated too, so the homepage can be fully translated. So then we have to be able to support that. There's also interface translations too that have to be in place to support it as well. So those are some of our big challenges. The summer exhibition, there's going to be a couple more interactives on those pages, as there were for Glow and for the Great Animal Orchestra, which were some of our past exhibitions. And obviously the Clips next week, which is big because that's a live cast. We'll be doing, we have an app for that where we use Drupal's JSON API, and we've actually been tooling a little bit around with more with doing things with AWS to help with the chatbot and other things. So a lot of good integrations I see. Yeah.
Well, that sounds very exciting. George Perry, Jim Birch, thanks so much for joining us here on the webinar. I hope everyone here learned something valuable. I feel like I will be repeating some of the phrases I heard today. Cascading opportunities. I feel like I've dropped a word there, but cascading opportunities. And I like the idea of bathing, or was it basking, in the design system. I like that as a concept. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great Thursday.